Okay. Um, Welcome everyone again, and this is the presentation, the Wildlife for You webinar that is titled Bear Encounters of the Worst Kind. Now there's going to be two presenters tonight. It'll be myself, Daryl Radijak. Many of you know me. I'm kind of the host and instructor on many of these classes, but we have a special guest. I love having Kim Delosier along with us. Both myself and Kim Delosier will be leading tonight's webinar, and it will probably last about 45 minutes to an hour of presentation and stories that we have to share with you. But then we're going to stick around as long as we need to answer whatever questions you may have. So welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate you being here and caring for wildlife as much as we do. So with that, I'm going to get started with the webinar, and just like we always do, what we want to do is give everyone, especially the new folks, an idea of who is actually talking to them. So Kim, I'm actually going to turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself since you're the first one listed here.
Okay. Well, it's so good to be with everybody this evening. And Carolyn, I see there from Virginia, so good to have you. Anyway, it's my pleasure to be with you. I spent really a whole career in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I had actually, it's in kind of my backyard from where I lived my entire life too. I went to University of Tennessee and graduated there in wildlife and fisheries science, and then actually went to the park right after that, and actually started a career with the Smokies in wildlife management. Started as a wild boar hunter for the park, then branched out from there into bear work and of course hog control, and then reintroductions of peregrine falcon, river otter, uh, had barn owls, red wolf, and then probably the last 10 years was having to work with the elk, which is probably one of my favorite programs too. So we have all those except the red wolf in the park now. So I was got to be a part of that. So I was pretty blessed too. I also been retired from the park since 2010, end of 2010. I also work now for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I work on elk restoration throughout the eastern U.S. We currently have, I think, 51 elk in an acclimation pen up in West Virginia. That those will be released sometime here in the next several weeks or so. Also, I teach classes for Safe Capture International. Uh, just to finish a class up near Syracuse, New York, and so I teach 5 or 6 classes every year for safe capture too. So other than that, and being a papa to 4 grandsons, and living on the farm, taking care of my dad who's got dementia. So I made a full circle from the farm, left, and now I come back, and now really I'm taking care of my dad's cattle and farm and all the above too. So had a pretty special life, and I feel pretty blessed and happy to be here tonight.
All right, thanks, Kim. With that, for those that don't know me that have never been in on one of these webinars, just to give you a little bit of background information about myself. My name's Daryl Radijak. I am a career wildlife biologist. I did receive my degree instead of from Tennessee like Kim. I received my degree from the College of Environmental Science and Forestry, which is actually part of Syracuse University. That was way back in 1992, so that kind of dates myself. But one of my first gigs as a wildlife biologist was the manager of the Appalachian Bear Center. Many of you know that today as the Appalachian Bear Rescue. It's just outside of Great Smoky Mountain National Park. It's actually where I met Kim well over 20 years ago. And I did that facility would do cub rehabilitation, but it is also an education and research facility as well. And that's why I fell in love with bears, and they've been my passion ever since. I love lots of critters, but bears are near and dear to my heart. But after I served about 5 years working as the manager of the Appalachian Bear Center, I then moved and took a position with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Uh, that was the state wildlife agency, obviously, for the state of Tennessee. And because of my experience at that bear center, I was soon promoted to be the big game program coordinator. So in that position, I was over black bears, white-tailed deer, elk, as well as wild hogs. And I did that for about 7 years, and it was fantastic. So instead of having this hands-on personal management of black bears like I did at the Bear Center, I was now responsible for managing bear populations within the state of Tennessee. Once again, I was promoted up again, and I became chief of wildlife for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. And I did that for about 5 years. And what I realized is when you promote higher and higher up, you get further and further away from the field and doing some of the things you love and seeing some of the things you love to see. And so I made a really difficult decision a couple of years ago to jump from the state agency, and I headed west. And I now live and work in New Mexico in the Southern Rockies, and still a wildlife biologist. And I'm fulfilling a childhood dream. I used to watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom and Marty Stauffer's Wild America, and I always wanted to live and work in the Rockies, and now I get to do that. So having said that, I've been working with bears and other big game animals for 20 years. Kim has been doing it for over 30 years, so combined, we've got about 50 years experience working with bears. So I know that was long and drawn out and probably took longer than we should have took on it, but I hope people are comfortable in the fact that we've spent quite a bit of time working with bears, and we feel good with the information we're about to present to you. So the way this presentation is going to go, I've created some slides. Kim, I will undoubtedly say, is an expert. He's more so than I am when it comes to these bear encounters, and I will yield to him. But I created a bunch of the slides that we worked together to develop, and I'll present a bunch of that, and I'll call on Kim to chime in. But then Kim is going to share a lot of his personal experiences with us as we move through the night. So with that, I'm going to take the lead for a little bit and then give you some background information about bears and why we are here tonight. And so, like I said, sit back, relax, join us, and then we'll partake in a group discussion before too long. So I gotta make sure I can click here. Okay. One of the things I always like starting my bear seminars, especially when we're talking about bear behavior and some of these encounters with humans, one of the questions that always comes up from the general public is, should we be afraid of bears? And so I created this slide, and I love this slide because what I'm about to do is show you a picture of one of the deadliest animals in all of North America. And so I'm about to reveal it, and let's see if you can tell me what it is. So for those of you out there, do you see the animal that is the deadliest in North America? The thing is, you got to look really close because it's at the bottom left-hand corner of that picture. And so in case you don't know, that thing flying around the screen right now is just a regular old honeybee, or just a bee. And if you look at statistics as far as what animals cause the most fatalities within North America, it's the bee that is the culprit there. So it's not the bear. A lot of people are afraid of bears, but they see that. They don't realize that bees cause almost 50 fatalities in North America per year. Now, if you compare that with our subject, the black bear, well, bears in general, bears generally cause less than 2 fatalities per year. And so if you do the math, now we're wildlife biologists and scientists, so sometimes we work with numbers and graphs, and you'll see that. But you're 25 times more likely to be killed by a bee than you are to be killed by a bear. And so what I want everyone to understand is, as we're talking about these really serious issues, the thing we want to hammer home is that we want you to be smart when you're out in the great outdoors. We don't want you to be afraid. And we're going to dispel a lot of the myths about bears, but we do want to let you know that this is a really serious topic as well. So with that, a lot of folks in the public, when they're trying to find out some information about an animal, any animal, and we'll take bears for this instance, and they want to know whether or not bears are really dangerous. And so a lot of times they'll get on Google and they'll type in whatever they're seeking information about. And the thing is, lots of information will pop up. And one of the go-to sources is Wikipedia. People love going to Wikipedia. And if you go there and you look about whether or not bears attack people, you're going to see these lists that seem daunting because they'll list all these fatal bear attacks. And if you look closely on there and you try to figure out where these attacks occur, it's pretty interesting because the vast majority of them occur in national parks and national forests. And I will tell you, it's mostly national forests. Um, the thing that's interesting there is both Kim and I work on national parks and national forests throughout our career, so we can speak to some of these situations here. And so when we're trying to figure out whether or not this is really an issue, again, we're wildlife biologists, and so we look at numbers quite a bit. And one of the things I did is I compiled information on bear attacks. And I did this about a year or two ago. And it's really interesting. I've kept this graph up to date. But if you look at the number of attacks that bears had on humans where a fatality was involved, you can parse it out by decade. And what you'll see here is that since 1930, when you're talking about black bears, you can see the number of fatal attacks from black bears has increased almost exponentially. And then you plot the same information for grizzlies, and it's almost the exact same kind of graph. So when you combine those two, when you combine the black bears and the grizzlies to see these fatal encounters with humans, this red line is what you get. And you absolutely see this exponential growth in the number of these severe encounters with humans. And so where are we going to fall out in this current decade that we're in? And I showed so far, I believe we've had 8 bear attacks, fatalities. We've had 11 grizzly fatalities. And so the trajectory, that graph is going to stay on its current trajectory. And so it's something that we really got to be mindful of. Something's going on here. And just so you know, the last serious fatality that we had was just over a year ago. So I want to stress, this does not happen. This is not an everyday occurrence. This does not happen all too often. But when it does happen, it's earth-shattering, especially for anyone involved in that situation. So we want to make sure we prepare people and give people the best information we can. So I'm going to go over a couple other interesting things before we get into bear behavior, and I bring Kim in here to lead some of this. Some of the other things that I thought were really interesting, when you look at fatalities since the 1900s, about a third of them have occurred just since the year 2000. So that's a lot. When you're looking over 100 years, or 120 years, a third of them have occurred just within the last 20. And so that speaks to that exponential growth that we're seeing in these number of severe encounters. Another thing that's really interesting, and I wish it was a live audience that I could talk back and forth to easily, but when you look at the percentages of these encounters, these fatalities, when they're from grizzlies or black bears, you see 52% of them are from grizzlies, 48% are from black bears. And you think, wow, that's 50-50. So black bears and grizzlies are equally dangerous, so to speak. That's not the case at all. Think of it this way. When you look at the number of grizzlies there are compared to the number of black bears are just, I believe there's 10 times more black bears in North America than there are grizzlies. So the fact that half of these serious encounters are from grizzlies, you better believe you've got to pay way more attention when you're in grizzly country than when you're around a black bear, because grizzlies are a different animal. The other thing that's interesting is historically 3 out of 4 victims were male, but that has been changing. Since the year 2000, about a third of the victims are now female. And so if I could ask you a question and have you respond verbally, it's interesting when I give this class why that is. And it's one of 2 reasons. It's either the fact that women, thankfully, are getting out in the outdoors more so than they did many, many years ago, or it's the simple fact that bears finally realize they taste better. So that's usually where people laugh, and I promise not to tell another stupid joke like that. So I will tell you that black bears are pretty indiscriminate when a serious encounter occurs. The victims have ranged from 5 months old all the way to 93 years old. The 93-year-old person, unfortunately, was a person that was not too far from where I'm at now here in New Mexico. So the main thing I want people to understand, we're all here because we love wildlife. We love bears. We love having encounters with bears, at least most of us do. But I don't want to instill this sense of fear in bears. But what we really want to do with this information we're presenting right now is to let you know that bears deserve our respect. They're beautiful, wonderful, amazing creatures, but they're also very powerful and can be very unpredictable. And we're going to talk about that over the next half hour or so. So when it comes to black bear behavior, and we're going to get into a little bit about that, the one thing that I want to stress is that in most encounters with human, and it's really important that you understand the most part, because we can tell you what we think the bear will do or how they react in most situations, but there's always that unknown. There's always that oddball thing, and sometimes those are the worst situations. But we can tell you, because of our experiences and how we've seen bears react to people, we can tell you what they usually do in most situations. But I want everyone to understand this is not 100% foolproof, because there's always that extraordinary situation that could come up. And so in most encounters with humans, the good thing with bears is they generally want nothing to do with us, and they want to avoid us. Now, that's not always the case, like I just said. The cool thing, though, is bears will talk to us. And when I say talk to us, there's vocalizations, there's behaviors, there's body posturing that they'll do to more or less tell us how they're feeling at the time. And we're going to go through some of that now. And this is where I'm going to bring Kim in to kind of add to some of the things that we're saying.
Daryl, I might say one thing on the previous slide about why a good percentage of those fatalities have happened since 2000. I think that Beth had said here that there's more women outdoors. I think that's true. That's true. Also, there's more people outdoors now. I think Stephen Herrero, who wrote the book Bear Attacks, would say that there's just more people out there. There's more encounters now just because the sheer numbers of people and the sheer numbers of bears. Of course, we know black bears, and that's what I'm going to talk about primarily is black bears, because that's where my experience is. But I think it's just because we have more people in the woods now. I think we have a higher likelihood that an encounter is going to occur. Of course, some of those don't necessarily turn out so well.
That's a great point. And typically in a couple of my other presentations, when I talk about bears, I have this slide that shows what human populations are doing as well as what bear populations are doing. And the crazy thing, and I'm actually going to refer to Kim here, what's so interesting is when we give these presentations and I'm live and in meeting with people, and I ask the question about what bear populations are doing now over the last 50 years, and overwhelmingly, the majority of the public thinks bear populations are dropping. And I have to correct that. And that's actually why we give a lot of these webinars, is to provide science-based information, the real truth about what's going on. And the crazy thing is, the wonderful, and it's not crazy, it's the wonderful thing is, and we know why it's happening, but bear populations are exploding in some areas. So if you look at North America, that bear population is going up. I will tell you in the West, it kind of stays the same because it's always been relatively stable. It's the East Coast where bear populations are really expanding. And the best way to understand that is bear populations were extirpated. They were wiped out locally in many of the eastern states. And because of the fact of game laws and state wildlife agencies that provide these protections, these bear populations are increasing. So Kim is absolutely correct. We have more people in the woods, but we also have more bears in the woods in many, many locations, and it's just going to lead to more and more encounters. And so with that word encounter, what we want to do is talk about these close encounters. And I underline that word encounter so we can define it right here, because it can be defined in a couple of different ways, but I want to let you know primarily what we're talking about. When you have an encounter with a bear, generally what we mean, it means that you are in close enough proximity to the bear that you affect his or her behavior or they affect your behavior. And so there's this distance, and it could vary, but it involves when the bear reacts to you or you react to the bear. Now, what that means if you're sitting there and you see a bear 300 yards away on the hillside and it's feeding in the meadow or wherever you see it, and the bear just goes about its business, that's not what we call an encounter. An encounter is one of these more close distance encounters where you affect that bear's behavior. And there are certain situations that you have to be mindful of because it could lead to a more high risk situation. And we're going to go over some of those situations right now. So, for example, one of the situations you got to be mindful of or be careful of is if you are to surprise a bear at close range or you get too close to it. And situations like this occur when you're in really dense vegetation, if you're hiking in a really thick forest. But even in the west or in the southwest where I'm at, you could be in like a canyon area and you could turn a corner and you can surprise an animal or a bear at close range. This is one of those counters that could turn for the worse. And so you got to be mindful of surprising an animal at close range. And Kim, did you want to add something about grizzlies in this situation?
Well, I think when I talk about black bears, and I think one thing I want people to know is that I think a lot of the information that we will pass on to you will be very helpful too. But one thing I want to make perfectly clear is that there's no absolutes here. There's not one. Every situation is going to be exactly the same. All bears are different out there too. They have bad bear days like we have bad people days. And so a bear one day may act totally different than it did the day before, whether it's hungry, it's suffering, it's injured, whatever it might be. So I just want to make sure there's no absolute. So when we say one particular thing, we're not talking necessarily about 100%. It's a general statement that we're providing this information based on what we know or what we have experienced, with black bears. That's what I'm going to say here. Typically, brown bears, what I've been told, are more prone to attack if they are surprised as compared to black bears. Black bears are not as prone to attack if they are surprised. Not that it doesn't happen, but typically they don't respond the same way as a brown bear. So if you basically surprise a brown bear, and I mean brown bears, also include the grizzlies, the subspecies there too, then obviously there's more of a chance of attack than you have with black bears. Some black bears will respond. There's no doubt about that. If they're surprised, they're going to respond to you, and we'll talk here about what that behavior is, how they respond to us.
Okay. So another encounter or a situation that you've got to be mindful of is whenever you are around a bear, it doesn't matter if it's a black bear or a grizzly, but you are around their food source. And though this is a picture of a carcass and a black bear feeding on a carcass, yes, you absolutely have to be mindful of a carcass you may encounter when you're out hiking in the woods. But we're not just talking about that type of food source. We are talking about anything that a bear may be feeding on. And so when you're talking about black bears and even grizzlies there, you have to understand that meat only makes up a very, very small portion of their diet. And so these bears are feeding on, I'm going to use a technical term, but it's called mast, M-A-S-T. And soft mast is pretty much the berry crop. During the summertime, you have blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, all those wonderful berries that are out there. It's called soft mast. And those bears are feeding in these luscious berry patches. And so if you're hiking in the summertime and you find yourself in the midst of all these blackberries that are in bloom and ripened, you have to understand you could be right in the middle of a bear's kitchen where it's feeding. And so be mindful of the food sources. So this is where it's really good to know a little bit about the animal you're concerned about. And so bears during the summertime will be feeding on a lot of those berry crops. During the fall, if there's a really good acorn crop, that again is their kitchen. So you have to be mindful around food sources whenever you're out hiking or out in the woods. Having said that, not all these encounters are always in the back country. Sometimes we have really serious encounters in the front country or literally in suburbia. And so these bears, unfortunately, sometimes get used to being around people, and they sometimes seek people food. And when I say people food, the biggest culprit there is garbage. And so if you're in an area where there's an open dumpster or open garbage can that bears have access to, understand in that situation you could be around a bear's food source. And so you got to be mindful of that. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Kim, as far as food sources go.
Well, I may summarize that too. It's just basically it's their space. The way I always kind of in my mind settle, about places or spaces in this park. There are places that are habitat for bears. It's animal space. It's animals where they're located. It's their habitat. And then I said we have our habitat too. We have our places that we can go in the park to, which roads or trails or campground picnic areas or whatever. So bears have to act a certain way, when they are on our turf. Likewise, we have to act a certain way when we're on their turf. And so when we go on their turf and we surprise them when we get too close, I think berries probably are one of the biggest reasons that a lot of these bears get surprised. You can't see very far. Occasionally you'll see, a carcass out there, but not very often. Most of the time it's going to be soft or hard massed in the summer or fall is when you may walk up on these bears and surprise them. Black bears I'm talking about, and surprise them.
Okay. Moving on to another situation you have to be mindful of is this is one that pretty much everybody knows. Everyone always understands that mama bears around their cubs are usually very, very protective, especially those grizzlies. Kim and I will attest, and Kim has more experiences than I do, but female black bears, they have a strong maternal instinct to protect their young, but it doesn't override their self-preservation. So if they're in a situation where they are at risk, unfortunately, sometimes they abandon their cubs. However, having said that, whenever you encounter a mother with cubs, it's one of those situations you have to be extra careful of because she is going to be on edge. She is going to want to protect her offspring. She's going to be a little less tolerant of people when her cubs are around. So this is a situation you have to be very mindful of. When you look at a lot of these encounters, especially with grizzlies, oftentimes you have a mother with cubs. So most people understand this can be one of those really intense situations.
I might add here, Daryl, that I think bears a lot of times mother bears are like maybe people in that think the younger the mother, maybe she's not as strong on the motherhood as what you may have your older, mature, more protected. I think mothers. I think the younger they are, the less experience they have around people, and the less they are maybe to protect their cubs in the case that they think that cub is threatened as well too. We've had bears that we've actually walked up on and surprised them too, and the bear bluff charged us, and we yelled back at it, and it took off and ran away and left the cubs there. They hooked back up later too, but I think the older the mother is, the more experience she has too, and the more protective she's going to be probably of her cubs.
Okay. Another situation, and this is not all too common for people to encounter, but we will bring it up because you just have to understand a little bit about bears. Understand that outside of a mother with her offspring, with her cubs or yearlings, adult bears are generally solitary animals. They don't seek companionship from other adult bears. So the only time they usually get together is during the mating season, which usually takes place late spring or early summer. And so if you're out and about on the national park or wherever you may be and you encounter two full-grown adult bears kind of mingling with each other, that's the mating season. And sometimes they get a little more stressed at that time of the year. It's not an extremely dangerous situation, but just understand some of the things you may encounter during certain times of the year. Another one, and I always want to bring this up because I believe there's actually a few folks joining us tonight who love camping or hiking with their dogs. I'm one of them. Whenever I go hiking, I usually take my two dogs, which are laying on a couch behind me. It's a wonderful thing. Dogs are great companions, But you have to understand that if you're out on the forest or in the park, well, you usually can't take dogs on a national park, so don't do it. But many national forests allow you to take your dogs with you. I will tell you one of the things that can lead to a high risk situation is when you have a dog off leash. In fact, I posed this question on a talk forum a few weeks ago to hear experiences folks had when they encountered a bear with their dog, especially if their dog was off leash. And in almost every situation, the dog was uncontrollable. Usually dogs are well behaved and respond well to voice command, but if there's a bear around, things get amped up and the dogs are much harder to control. And when they go after the bears, you have to understand the bear is then getting amped up, especially if there's cubs around. And so situations like this, when there is a dog off leash, it just really intensifies the situation as to what may happen. Now, I will tell you there are many dogs, many breeds. This particular dog in this picture is called a Karelian bear dog, and they're trained to chase bears, and that's what they do. They're really good at it. However, many of the folks that enjoy going for hikes sometimes take their favorite companion that looks like this. And this dog may encounter a bear, whether or not it's a black bear or grizzly, and may think it's much tougher than it is and go after the bear. Sometimes the bear will run. Sometimes the bear will take a couple of steps and realize what's chasing it and turn around and go after the dog. Now, where do you think this dog runs to when the bear starts chasing it? And so we've had situations, in fact, if there's time later, I can tell you about a situation I experienced here out west where a mother bear got really amped up because of a small dog like this, and it almost caused a really serious encounter. The main thing I want you to understand here is that in some situations with a dog present, the bear sometimes flips a switch and just changes gears and will go after that dog. And when it's going after that dog, it's not looking to play with that dog. It's looking to do damage in many situations. And unfortunately, if there's people around, they could get caught up in that situation. So just be mindful. I'm not saying don't hike with dogs because I love doing it. You just have to understand the situation you may be putting yourself into. So,
I might add one thing. I think, and of course, we don't have a lot of experience with, well, let me say not with hiking with dogs. There's a lot of hunting dogs that are in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, of course, illegally as well, too. But I think it's very unpredictable how bears react to a dog, whether it's on leash or off leash, too. If the bear feels threatened, he may or may not. It depends on how big of the threat is to that animal, too. So it's really hard to predict what a bear is going to do in the case of a dog, and it's hard to predict what a dog's going to do as well, too. So that's something that you just really don't know for sure until you're there and see what happened. But the best thing is try to keep a safe distance between bears and dogs.
excellent point. So what I want everyone to understand is all these situations that I just showed you, whether or not you surprise a bear close distance, or you're around their food source, or a mother with cubs, that mating season, or even with dogs. And this is where it's really important to understand this. We're saying in most situations, a bear is going to act defensively. And what we mean by that is it's trying to defend something. So in the case of a surprise or too close or the mother with cubs, it's defending its turf. It's defending its offspring. So in every situation you see here, a bear generally acts in a similar fashion. Again, like Kim said, and we'll stress again, it's not 100% foolproof. But in this defensive situation, the bear generally tries to increase the distance. They're trying to get away from you. They're trying to get their cubs away. They're trying to get themselves away. They're trying to get distance between themselves and the dog. They're reacting in a defensive manner. And oftentimes you'll see very distinct cues or behaviors that the bears do to let you know how they are feeling. And we'll go over that. Now, there are some things that we've got to tell you is that every once in a while, instead of acting in a defensive nature, a bear could potentially act in an offensive nature. And these are ones that you got to pay particular attention to. And we're going to stress some of these situations because these can turn out to be some more severe situations. And so, first off, there's generally two categories. They're both very similar, but they have their differences as well. So the first one is when a bear is seeking some type of food reward. It's trying to eye you up, trying to figure you out, whether or not there's a potential to get food. And now at this point, they're not looking at you as the food, but whether or not they smell something on you, or they're just trying to figure out what the situation is. So they're trying to seek some type of reward. And in this situation, the bear is trying to close the distance. It's acting offensively. It's trying to approach you. The one that you have to be most particular concerned about and aware of, and I will tell you this almost never happens. It's extremely, extremely rare, but you should be able to identify it if it does occur, is that when a bear begins to seek you. And this is what we call predatory behavior. If you look at all those stats that I presented earlier in this presentation about the fatalities that resulted from black bears, I think Stephen Herrero did. Stephen Herrero is the bear researcher from Calgary who's done insane amount of work on bear attacks, and he analyzed the situations, and over 90, I think it's 92% of all the black bear fatalities was the bear was acting in a predatory nature. And so the reason we teach this, the reason we instruct this is not to scare you, but to inform you that there are situations that you got to be really mindful of, and the only way you can be mindful of them is if you know about them. And so in these last two situations, a bear can act in an offensive nature where they're trying to seek some type of food reward. And so, Kim, if you want to add anything to this slide before I go on to the next.
Well, I think there might be another category too where you want to add offensive in a case where bears are competing with each other as well too. When bears are competing for food or whatever it might be, there's a battle out there too, and of course they definitely tend to be offensive that we're trying to actually kill. Male bears tend to kill cubs as well too, and so they're definitely not defensive. They're definitely going after cubs to try to kill them to protect their territory as well too. So there's always, I think, exceptions to the rule exactly what offensive actually is. But the main thing, what we're concerned about too, is if a bear basically is, we let you know it's an offensive behavior, that's where you better pay attention. Defensive is not quite as concerning, but if they're in an offensive type of behavior, and we'll talk more about that, about a bear walking down the trail behind you, those kind of things too. I think a lot of times these bears are evaluating who you are, what you have, and depending on their history, they may have gotten food from people before just by following people. Those people threw the food down, and then they basically went up and got their food. And so they may be following that, we've trained them basically to do certain things to be able to get our human food from us as well too. But the ones that really follow you too, I don't know if they're necessarily in a predatory mode. They could be, or it may change, and they may be later depending on how you act or you don't act.
Okay. So what we want to do, and we'll try to get through this quickly so we can get to some stories. We're going to try to teach you to learn to recognize some of these body posturing or these behaviors and vocalizations that bears do when you do have an encounter with a bear. And so understand that we're going to be talking about different kinds of situations, and depending on the situation, there's going to be different communications that are going to be expressed by the bear and hopefully by you as well. And so the thing that you would best benefit you is to recognize what kind of situation you're in. And so obviously this falls back to, is it a defensive situation for the bear, or is it an offensive situation for the bear? Now, if it is a defensive situation, I will tell you almost every encounter you have, the bear is going to be in one of these defensive modes. And so they're going to, their main intention, again, nothing is 100%, but generally their main intention is to increase the distance between you and him or her. And so they're going to be trying to get back or get away from that area or get you away from that area. Now, in that offensive situation, understand that things reverse. Instead of a bear trying to increase the distance, it's trying to close the distance. It's trying to figure out what you are or what you may have. And so they're two very distinct situations. So the first thing that will help you out the most is understand whether or not that bear is in a defensive situation or an offensive situation. And so, depending on what kind of situation it is, their behaviors are usually very different. And so, if you encounter a bear in a defensive situation, so it's a female with cubs, or you're around its food source, or you surprise it at close range, one of the first things a bear will do is try to communicate with you that it is upset or nervous. And they have certain vocalizations. And I wish I could do them. I'm not that good of an actor, but many of you may have heard this. They will pop their jaws. They literally smack their jaws back and forth really quick. And it makes this auditory sound. It's just popping of their jaw. And they're literally smacking their lips together. That is a sign that the bear is upset. It's nervous that you're near them. They want you away from them. Another behavior they may do is what we call huffing. And again, many of you may have heard this, because if you get too close to the bear and the bear gets nervous, it begins exhaling forcefully. And you could hear it. You could hear that heavy breathing. It's very, they overdo it. They want you to hear it, but it's a very good warning. And again, it means they're upset or they're nervous because you're in their space and they want you to back up. Another vocalization that you may hear is when a bear is getting agitated, it may moan. I guess the best way to describe this is think of kind of like a Chewbacca-like moan. I'm not going to do it because I'll make a fool of myself, but you could probably picture a bear moaning, and that's just them telling you they're getting upset and nervous. And then lastly, oftentimes when a bear is getting upset or nervous, their face becomes very animated. They will yawn, they'll actually yawn. And a lot of people will see that and say, oh, the bear's tired, or look how cute that is. Another thing, and I love this, is the bear will begin to salivate, and you'll literally see saliva dripping down. Imagine what the general public, what most people think, if they're close to a bear and a bear begins to salivate. Oftentimes people misread that the bear is acting vicious and it's hungry and it wants to attack. That is generally not what's going on in that bear's mind. That bear, the salivation in most situations, is that bear is just really upset, can't control its facial expressions, and it's letting you know that it's uncomfortable with you around. So Kim, anything you want to add to these particular behaviors where a bear is upset or nervous with your presence?
Just want everybody to keep in mind it's defensive, it's defending its space or its food. And that's really the two reasons why they do. So one thing I might add to, sometimes they'll jump over and they'll grab some vegetation, they'll shake it too. What they're trying to do, they're trying to make themselves as bold and big and aggressive as they possibly can to try to get you to move back. And what they're telling you is they want you to move back, and that's exactly what you should do.
I'm glad you added it, because we're getting right to that, Kim, because what happens is if they go through all these behaviors or these vocalizations, and they're letting you know that they're nervous, and if you do not respond, if you do not react appropriately and back up, and you stay in their comfort zone, then the bear will kind of up its behaviors or up its ante, so to speak. And instead of telling you he's nervous, he's going to try to tell you to back up. It's almost to the point where he's getting mad because you're not moving away. You're not getting out of his personal space. And so a couple of things they might do to get you to back up, and I promise you they're very effective. I've seen it happen many times, not just to me, but to other folks that were too close. A bear will do a bluff charge. Now, a lot of people think a bluff charge is when a bear runs at you for 30 yards and just stops right in front of you. That's not particularly what we call a bluff charge. That's actually a full-blown charge. A bluff charge is usually where a bear takes one or two steps in your direction, and they may be very quick steps. And so it will look at you and then just turn and just take a couple of steps right at you. I promise you it's very effective at getting your attention, and it generally causes you to back up even when you don't realize you're backing up. Another thing, and Kim mentioned it, it's this behavior of, or I call it ground swatting here, but it's where a bear will tear apart vegetation or something nearby to him. And what he's trying to tell you is, I really need you to back up. If you don't back up, this is what I'm capable of doing. And so they'll tear up the ground, they'll tear up a bush. They want to put on this display to show that they're really getting mad. And like I said, both the bluff charge and this ground swatting behavior, it's very effective because you suddenly realize, hey, I need to get out of here. And that's what the bear is trying to tell you. So all of these behaviors and vocalizations that you see here, in general, this is how a bear usually behaves. Again, we're never going to be 100% positive, but this is how a bear usually behaves when it's in this defensive mode. You're within his comfort zone or her comfort zone, and they just want you to back up and leave them alone. And they do a lot of these behaviors. So before I go to the offensive behaviors, is there anything else you want to add, Kim?
No, I think so. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and a lot of times common sense comes into play here. The bear, acts like Daryl said, if it's acts very nervous or upset too, and it lunges towards you too, pops its jaws. It's really what it's telling you. I need you to back up because you're in my space. It has that fight or flight kicks in as well too, and so if it's a bear that's been around people for a lot, he may not respond the same way. If it's a really wild bear that's had very little contact with people, you may get an immediate response to by all these different vocalizations here too. So it just depends on the condition of the bear, depends on how much contact they've had with people before, depends on how much what condition they are, body condition. If they're pretty thin and losing weight, and they find a really good food source, then they're going to be pretty serious trying to get you away from what they're feeding on to. So common sense really kicks in here.
Okay, so those behaviors and those vocalizations were all defensive. Now this, like I said, I can't stress enough, this is what you are going to encounter in most situations. Whenever you're around black bears, they're going to react in this defensive manner. They don't like being around you. Every once in a while, though, you may encounter a situation which would be classified as offensive. It is much rarer, but it is something you have to be mindful of. And so if you do encounter a bear in this offensive type of situation, remember, they're trying to close the distance between you and them. They're trying to figure you out, trying to figure if there's some type of reward for them there. And sometimes that message he's sending is that he's hungry. He or she is hungry. And they're trying to get closer to you to figure you out. Now there's some behaviors that you got to be mindful of if they are in this offensive mode. First off is it's this idea of stalking. Now I will tell you, a lot of people will be walking down a trail and they will look over their shoulder and they'll see a bear that's following them. In many situations, it's simply that the bear is walking in the same direction. Trying to go to point A to point B, you're both just traveling in that same direction. This idea of stalking is more of this idea of constant pursuit. The bear will not let you leave his sight. So if you see a bear following you and you turn down another trail, you change your course multiple times, and every time you change your course, the bear changes his course to continue to follow you. That is what we were talking about. That is this stalking behavior, this idea of constant pursuit. Now, when they're doing this, one of the things that they oftentimes do, they keep their head down low. Think of this predatory type of behavior where they're trying to be sneaky. And so oftentimes they keep their head low to the ground. Sometimes it sways back and forth. But another thing they'll do is they tend not to let you out of their sight. They stay locked on you. Their eyes are always locked on you. If you ever see, or if you ever have a bear acting in this type of situation, this is one of those displays, these offensive displays, which should signify you, hey, this bear is trying to check me out. And so, Kim, I'll let you expand on the offensive type of behaviors in case there's more that I missed, but anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's really pretty simple. It's typically there are no vocalizations at all. They don't make any noise. They just basically come straight for you when that's happening. Now, let me talk a little bit about the following deal, because the following is something that always bothered me, and I was concerned about that as well too. And whenever bears follow people, I'm really not for sure what their motive is. I don't know. I think they're after our food. That's what I think. But sometimes I don't know if they know what they may have gotten food before and they're following people and seeing, if they have something to eat, or they could be evaluating a person as a possible prey species. And depends on how, if that's the case, it depends on how that person acts, may help that bear decide whether it's going to go after the person or it's going to run away, one of the two. So basically, it's just that typically, remember with defensive, they vocalize, they do the charging, bluff charging. Offensive, they typically no vocalizations, and they basically are focused on you when they come in.
Now, the one thing I'm going to tell you is that there are videos that you can go online, you could Google a lot of these kind of videos to see these behaviors. I will tell you, Google, I love it and I hate it. There's so much wonderful information out there, but there's also a lot of junk information out there. And so if anyone is interested or has questions about any of these particular behaviors, I do have some videos that I particularly show. Unfortunately, it's difficult for us to show videos using this Adobe Connect because depending on your connection speed, sometimes they're really choppy. So if anyone's interested in any of those videos, contact me via email and I could send you links to look at some of these particular behaviors, because I had to weed out the good videos and the bad videos. Like I said, on Google, people will say, oh, here is a video of a bear stalking me, and it wasn't stalking them. And so just be mindful of the information you get off the internet, because there's some really good stuff, but there's also a lot of bad stuff. Contact me if you want some information on any of the videos of any of these behaviors. Now, once you see a bear display, whether or not it vocalizes, whether or not it displays some of these body posturing or these other types of behaviors, this is your chance to communicate with them. This is your chance to react. And so let's start with that defensive situation. So you encounter a mother with cub, or you're near a food source. What do? The first thing you do, or you don't want to do, is you don't want to pose as a threat, especially if it's a mother with cubs. You don't want to intimidate that mother, especially if she's in a not so good mood and she's particularly fond of her offspring. And so you don't want to act in a threatening manner to that bear. And so what you want to do is you want to slowly back away and get yourself out of that situation. Or if the bear is walking towards you, yield the right of way to the bear. Oftentimes bears will be going in a particular place and you're simply blocking the way. They're not coming at you in any manner of threatening. They're just trying to get to point A to point B, and they've got to go through the area that you are occupying. And so yield the right of way to the bear. This is particularly important, especially with grizzlies. Now, if the bear comes at you in this situation where you're around a food source or this defensive situation, you want to make sure the bear knows you're there. Believe it or not, sometimes a bear stumbles upon people, the wind is blowing in the right direction, or they may not even care, but the bear's just not paying attention to you. Make sure that bear knows you're there. So yell at it, not aggressively, but shout it, say, hey bear, hey, yo, I'm here, and try to let that bear know that you're there and you don't want to get into an encounter with that bear. And last but not least, if a situation escalates, and this is one we could talk all night, if it's a mother with cubs or a surprise or something happens really fast and a bear just suddenly snaps and acts and has contact with you, I always suggest the first thing you do is drop down, curl up, because the thing the bear wants to do is eliminate that threat. If it's a female with cubs, she just wants to eliminate that threat. And I've got personal stories I can share with you in a bit, but you have to understand if attack persists, then you have to fight back. Now, depending on who you talk to, which government agency you talk to, A lot of this advice may vary here and there. We're able to talk at length about these different situations and what is best to do. It's not always foolproof, but we're trying to make you understand or help you understand what may be the most appropriate course of action. Now, I will tell you, when it comes to grizzlies, there is one thing, and hopefully you'll see that red line strike it out. The one thing you don't want to do with a grizzly is fight back because you're not going to win. With a black bear, believe it or not, given the size of black bears, many of these bears are the size of a human, if not smaller in many situations. If you fight back, there's a chance that you could fight a black bear off. In most situations with a grizzly, that's not going to happen. And so with that situation, you just curl up and hope for the best. Anything, I'm sure, Kim, you could add to kind of your reaction if a bear approaches you and begins getting close in this defensive situation.
Well, yeah, I can too. Of course, if it's defensive behavior and you're backing up or something, that's going to take care of most situations too. If you're backing up as well, and I'm sure we're going to talk about offensive right now too. But uh, like I said, common sense comes into play right here too. If the reason we have people and it's not an absolute. It's not every single case. If you fight back, because there are a couple of cases where people have stopped fighting back, and the bear basically stopped its aggression towards them as well. But as a general rule, if you're attacked by a black bear, you fight back. Now, uh, why do we do that? Because there's a good chance that bear has considered you a prey. So obviously, its motive is to basically consume you for food, and basically playing dead's not going to work. Obviously, there was a case in Arizona where I think the girl was 16 years old. It was I think it was like a 12 or 14 million dollar lawsuit where she was attacked by a black bear at nighttime in her tent, and it ate several pounds of flesh off of her right hip, is what I recall. And obviously I can't say she was playing dead, but she laid there long enough to where that bear actually consumed enough flesh that she started yelling and screaming, and the bear actually then moved away where they could get someone in and take care of the bear as well too. So obviously the general thing, the big difference between bears, black bears and brown bears, is that if you're attacked by a black bear, you fight back. If you're attacked by a brown bear, you play dead. So that's kind of a general statement.
Okay. And we are almost done here because what we want to do is now tell you about what you do if you encounter a bear in this offensive manner. Um, I always throw that joke up, but it's a serious situation. You don't make the will because here it is. We're telling you what you could do to give you the best odds of coming out of this situation unscathed. So the first thing you want to do if a bear is approaching you and it's looking for a meal, it's looking for some type of food reward. First off, don't pose as a meal. And Kim and I talk at length about this. You don't want to throw food at it either. You don't want to give a meal to that bear. But the thing you want to do if the bear is trying to get closer to you, the first thing you want to do is seek a safe area. If without running, the last thing you want to do is run. You never run if a bear is approaching you in this type of situation. You want to back away slowly, always face that bear. But if you're close by to a cabin or a car or your campsite or other people, you want to seek a safer area to get to. Or if you're alone, another thing you want to do is get better positioned to stand your ground, because we are going to tell you here and now, in this type of situation, you got to be the bigger, tougher bear in this situation. And so find a higher point, make yourself bigger. This is where if this bear continues to come at you, you get aggressive, you get mad. And here we're going to tell you how to act. It may be very difficult. It may go against every fiber in your being to be aggressive and act out towards this bear coming at you. But if it's acting in this manner, this is probably the best thing for you to do to get him to break off this approach. And so you get mad at it, you yell, you get aggressive, you make yourself look bigger, If you're around a lot of other people, you get in a big group. If you have kids there, get the kids behind you or in the middle of you. You throw things at it. What you're trying to do is scare that bear away. You get that bear to back down because he's testing you to see if you're going to give in to him. And so this is where it's your turn to get aggressive towards him. Obviously, if contact occurs, just like Kim said with the last slide, this is where they're actually trying to find that food source. And so you are going to fight with all your might. Your life depends on it because he's looking for that meal. And so, again, we're telling you what you should do. How an individual would react in this situation, I cannot predict. Nor could we predict exactly how the bear is going to react. This just comes with years and years of experience and seeing how other situations have unfolded. But with that, Kim, do you have anything to add regarding the offensive type of situation?
Well, I'll tell you what I might do, Daryl. I might mesh these two together a little bit too, and just tell you kind of what my patent answer is whenever people ask me, what do I do if I encounter a bear? Which I've been asked that, I don't know, several hundred times too. What do I do if I encounter a bear? And I said, well, if you're in the front country, and you're able to gather your food up, a bear comes in, gather your food up, and go to your car, go to your camper, wherever it might be. But most of the people are talking about in the back country where you're in bear habitat and you don't have a safe place to go to. So I tell people, if we mesh these two together, I always say, hey, if you see a bear, it's feeding on blackberries, it's eating food in some way, you're far enough away, you'll get your binos out and watch it at a safe distance to enjoy the animal too. However, if you're too close to it, and you surprise the bear too, and it bluff charge, vocalizes, go ahead and back up slowly. Say, okay, bear, just in a very low tone. Okay, bear, I'm sorry, what I done, I'm going to back up, and so you back up. But let's say, for example, if you're on a trail and you meet a bear, it starts walking towards you. I tell people, I said, yield the right of way. If you're on a trail, try to move off trail if you can. Let that bear pass by. If it's going down a creek bed or a little valley or a ridge line, try to let that animal travel in that way and see if that works. And if it goes on its way, that's what you're trying to accomplish to avoid an encounter. Now, let's say, for example, it doesn't, though. Say it follows you, it comes towards you, and you've moved away from it, but it continues to get closer. So at that point, what I tell people to do, this is your chance to where you have to reestablish your dominance over that animal. Now, I don't know what the animal's after. He could be after your food or he could be after you. I'm not really for sure. If he's approaching you and he's not vocalizing at all, obviously we think that's an offensive type of behavior. Then at the time you have to reestablish your dominance. Make yourself as big as possible. Pretty easy for me. So what we tell people is stand up on a rock, get up on a log. If you have several people together, there's power in numbers, so have people close together. If you have children, have those small people in the middle or behind you, because typically if there's an attack and it's predatory, usually the small individuals are the one that he goes after first. So when this bear's coming, and it's okay to throw rocks, it's okay to throw sticks at it too. And Stephen Herrero and I, we talked about this in detail. So if you think the bear is after your food, well, how would you know that? If you think a bear is after your food. And one thing I might throw in here is that if you're throwing a rock at the bear, and the bear runs over and starts to smell the rock, it might give you an indication that, hey, someone's thrown food to this bear before because he's run over smelling a rock. So that makes you think he's really after your food. At that point, don't turn and run. Stand your ground. Get back, bear. Yell, get back, bear. Throw rocks at it. And I'm not throwing here, I'm an advocate for bear spray. So if you do have bear spray, this might be the time you want to consider deploying bear spray. If the bear's a problem, he's going to get close enough that you're going to be able to be effective with bear spray. If he gets 5 or 6 or 7 yards away, then you might think about deploying bear spray. Make sure that bear spray is either on a holster or some kind of a device you're very close to, you're able to get to that quickly. If it's in your backpack and a bear's coming at you, you probably won't have time to be able to take your pack off and retrieve that bear spray. So I tell people, whatever you can do to reestablish your dominance over that animal, yelling, throwing stuff, keep people together, bear spray, whatever you can. If the bear shows no interest and you don't think it's after your food, well, let's say, for example, first, if you think it's after your food, it smells a rock, it smells a stick, and it comes up there, and he'll stick his nose up kind of, he'll throw his head up like he's trying to smell. He's got a whiff of something that maybe you're carrying. And we tell people don't throw your food at that point, because that's what a lot of people do. They'll throw food at it at that point. We'll say don't throw your food at that point. If you can run the bear away without a reward, then you're better off. If he makes contact with you, and I'll tell you a story or two here in a second, but if he makes contact with you, if he slaps your leg, he grabs your arm, he bites something too, then we tell people to separate yourself from your food. Now, what does that mean? That means either put your backpack down, put your food sack down, do whatever, and get away from it. Move everybody away from that too. And if that bear's after your food, what's he going to do? He's going to go over to your food, and you'll be able to slowly move away. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, that the bear's made contact with you in some form or fashion. You've laid your backpack down, your food down, and you slowly move away, and the bear comes over and smells your backpack, but he turns and comes toward you after that. He shows no interest in your food. Then that's the most serious encounter of all. Then that bear probably considers you prey, and he probably is going to attack you, and hopefully that won't happen, but that's a possibility. If he jumps on you, though, if he grabs you, if he jumps on you too, you fight back with whatever you possibly can. We basically, the eyes and the nose and the mouth basically is very sensitive. There's a lot of nerve endings there too. So if you have car keys or sticks or anything, you can poke them in the eyes or in the nose, anything you can in the face, and hopefully you'll try to, hurt that animal as much as you possibly can. But you fight back for your life, because more than likely that bear at that point has considered you prey, and playing dead will not be very effective.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Kim, because Carrie had a question about how to fight back, and you answered it perfectly about going at the bear's face with its nose and eyes. And so you employ any means you can to do damage to that bear to get him to stop the attack. And obviously, Beth, hopefully in most situations, when I teach the bear and cougar safety class, I teach everyone that there's bear spray, there's bear bells, there's all these gadgets and equipment you can buy to stay safe. But my number one lesson in those bear safety classes is the best tool you carry with you, fortunately you carry with you all the time, and that's your brain. And trying to get your brain to understand the situation you're in. And so hopefully if you realize that there's a female, you'll know where the cubs are at. But yes, this situational awareness to know what's around, and that goes also for this offensive. If you can think fast enough, and most people are blessed with incredibly powerful brains, you can understand, all right, this situation is making me uncomfortable. What do I need to be looking for? And like Kim said, to get to a safe place, get higher up. Your brain is incredibly powerful, and it processes these things really, really quickly. And so in most situations, it's your brain that keeps you the safest. But by all means, if you have bear spray, get that handy and ready. But knowing that situational awareness is key. So with that, what I'm going to do now, and I think this is something that I think you'll find the most interesting. I've got a couple, but I'm not even going to bring mine up, because Kim has spent his career working in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Not only does it have the highest human densities, but it has some of the highest black bear densities. And he can tell you more real life encounters than probably any other biologist in North America. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to Kim just to talk about some of these encounters that really stand out. And again, we're not here to scare people. We're here to educate people about real life situations, because these are wonderful. You can see they're beautiful, incredible, amazing animals, but they're also powerful and can sometimes be unpredictable. And so these situations you have to understand can occur, and we're trying to equip you with that information to make sure that you are best prepared if that situation does occur. So Kim, with that, if there's any particular stories you want to share with us, we'd love to hear them.
I can. Yeah, I've got a lot of them, obviously, and we'll have time to cover all of them. But one thing I might add, and Beth, you did mention something I was going to talk about in deploying bear spray. Obviously, it is affected by wind direction too. So obviously, if you bear spray into the wind, it blows back in your face. You're not going to be able to do the things you need to do to be able to take care of yourself in a bear attack. So make sure that you're very conscious about that as well too. So whenever you use bear spray, make sure the animal has to be fairly close to be able to get it. And the whole point is to get it in the animal's eyes. Of course, it's capsaicin. It's going to definitely make a difference and try to burn that animal's eyes to where it'll irritate enough that it'll leave you as well. You know, it's not 100%, but it definitely is going to put the it's going to put the advantage on your side if you're able to use bear spray. I might say this: it's organic though, and so don't think because it's bear spray, it's a cure-all. You can spray it on your tent or spray it on your backpack, and it's going to keep animals away. It probably will serve as an attractant if you use it in that form. I've heard some people going around their campsite and spraying the perimeter around their campsite, and since it's organic, it may actually serve as an attractant rather than a deterrent. So just keep that in mind if you do have bear spray. But it's really a tool to equalize, I think, who you are. If you're a smaller person and you need a little extra help, then that probably would be something I might consider. Now, also, I think Tracy there talked about horns. I was going to bring that up. Some bears, they will respond to a horn. It does scare them. And Daryl and I didn't talk about this, but firearms too. And I've had a lot of people say, you know, I always carry my firearm if I'm in bear country as well. Are they effective against bears? Well, let me say this. If I had a choice of a bear charging me, would I rather have a firearm, a pistol, or a rifle, or whatever, or bear spray? And my choice would be bear spray. And you think, well, why would you do that? Because I'm telling you, when a bear is charging you, you think you know how you're going to respond, and you probably don't know how you're going to respond in that situation. Because I've had bears charge me before as well too, and it's really pretty unnerving. You know they're going to stop, or at least you feel pretty confident they're going to stop too. But still, your anxiety level is pretty high. Your blood pressure is going off of the charts. So you got to be very, very careful and be prepared for that as well. So I think that firearms, may have a place in certain situations because obviously, but you have to be able to be very well versed in the use of firearms, especially with a charging animal. Shotguns are probably preferred over rifles or even pistols, because I had cases where people discharged their firearm at a bear and they were so worked up that I'm not sure if they knew, which end of the gun they were holding when they pulled it up there. So you got to be very careful about firearms around bears. Will the noise scare them? And I know that in the Smokies you can carry a firearm if you have a carry permit. However, it is illegal to discharge a firearm, if that makes sense. And I think the biggest difference there is that you have to feel like your life is threatened before you discharge a firearm in a charging animal. We've had people that have actually shot firearms or shot a pistol up in the air, made noise, and some of the bears actually moved away. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but that has happened before as well. So just a little bit about firearms, a little bit about bear spray, a little bit about horns, but obviously some bears will respond to all of them, and other bears may not respond to any of them at all. So I might just mention that right there. And one thing I might talk here just real quickly with some of the bear incidents in the Smokies, and it makes sense that most of our encounters that are negative encounters happens around, in June, first to middle of June. And that makes sense. It's probably when you're going to have more people there in the park. You're going to have more garbage there. You're going to have more bear activity during that time of the year. Now, one thing I think, we might consider too is it safe to go in areas where there are bears? And I think that's kind of a loaded question. I tell people that, well, you know what, in the cases with the Smokies where you have a very high bear density, the park may be close to being full of bears. And bear populations, bear will tend to self-regulate themselves, where they push out the subadult males whenever they reach sexual maturity. So they kind of self-regulate themselves to a point. Some of the male bears actually kill some of the cubs to protect their territory. But the most part, you have a lot of bears. And I tell people it's kind of like having an apartment building that's built for 100 people, and there's 150 people living in there. There's some stress associated with that many people in those quarters too. And I think bears may, very simply, might be the same thing. I think the more bears you have, the more competition you have, the more you're nearing that carrying capacity for that habitat, you're going to have more stress, I think, in the population. And my opinion is you're probably going to have more negative encounters in that situation, and some of those rarely may lead into to basically to a human fatality. Will it happen again in the Smokies? I think so. I think it will. Uh, Typically, we talk about predatory behavior, and I'm going to tell you just a few things here. There's kind of some key things. There's kind of some that we talk about whenever we have an animal that has predatory behavior. Typically, in black bears, most of those bears are male bears. Uh, Typically, the attack occurs during the daytime. Not always, but in the daytime usually. The persistence of the attack. So they play for keeps. When they come after you and attack you in a predatory attack, they're not just going to bite you on the leg or scratch your arm or things like that. They're basically apt to kill you. Most of these attacks occur in April, May, or in the fall, October or so, and it makes sense. Bears come out of so-called hibernation. They're very hungry, looking for food. They're more stressed. And then you have soft mast in the summertime, and then you have the fall. And if you have a bear that's trying to gain a lot of weight, a lot of condition before into the den, then obviously there's more stress during that period as well too. So it's all tied with food, common sense. Typically, bears that are predatory towards people, there is normally no human food involved, and that's kind of a surprising thing. Not in all cases, but typically there's no human food involved in a case where there is a human predatory bear attack. And lastly is they typically go after the smallest person if given the opportunity. Not necessarily always, but I'll talk about that here in a couple of cases here to kind of let you know about that. So I'm going to talk about these in these three cases here I've got, and let you know that kind of refer back to this list here on predatory behavior. Now, I don't want to make this. I don't want to make this like the focus here, but I just want people to be educated that if they do ever encounter a bear and it has predatory behavior towards them too, how they should react and try to be able to evaluate, if that is predatory behavior. Of course, we had a case in August the 11th of 2008. We have Evan Paula. Evan was let me pull this up right here right now. Evan was a 7-year-old boy. I think they were from Florida, and they were hiking on a trail just outside of Gatlinburg. A second right here. Yeah. They were hiking on a trail just outside of Gatlinburg near Rainbow Falls trailhead, and he was 8 years old. Evan was about 70 pounds. He was hiking with his father and his older brother. They were from Florida, and they had really no experience with black bears at all. Interesting, they had no food at all, no food in their possession. And so the brother basically let us know when we interviewed him that they were walking at the stream. They're picking up stones or rocks, and they're walking from the stream back up to the trail to go down to their vehicle. The dad was back behind, but the brother was turning and started climbing up on a rock, and he could see Evan, the 8-year-old brother, ahead of him. A bear came up behind him and put his paws on the back of Evan's shoulders and was riding Evan down. And his brother said as he was pushing him down, his mouth was wide open and was trying to grab him on the back of the neck or the head. And so he did. He grabbed him. He had some lacerations on his neck, on his shoulder, and his dad went on the attack. And so his dad went over and started kicking, yelling, screaming, and actually grabbed Evan and told Evan to run. So Evan took off running too. The bear went one direction, Evan went the other. They circled around and pow, they hit again. And so the persistence of the attack is one key element, whether it's predatory behavior or not. The dad went on the attack again, and actually he was able to get Evan, away from the bear too. They yelled and screamed, moved the bear away, where they were able to go back and to safety at their vehicle. Of course, rangers came up and they went up in the same area, and a bear approached them, and then they shot the bear and killed it. They actually took the bear, necropsied it, and it had part of Evan's shoe actually in his stomach. So there was no doubt that this bear was definitely out to kill Evan. just think about it. We tell people, I say, you know what? If you're hiking in the mountains or in bear habitat or bear country, it may not be a good idea to allow young children to run on ahead of you, even though they want to, for this very reason. What happened here in the Evan Paula case in the Smokies, just because if they're there and it meets a bear in that rare situation too, where it's exhibiting predatory behavior, and there's no one there to be able to help that young boy or young girl, you could have some pretty dire consequences associated with it. So we tell people try to keep children as close as you can in the event that ever happens too. I've got another one here too that I might talk about it, and it has some good information with this. It was on a Sunday afternoon in the Smokies. There was an elderly couple that was hiking the trail. We're talking about middle of the afternoon. A bluebird day, blue sky, and a bear came out of the rhododendron thicket and started following this couple too. Well, they tried to move away from it, and it kept on closing the distance, getting closer. And the animal actually got very close to them, so they knew they felt very, very threatened. So basically, the bear was coming up very close to them to the feet. They were yelling, they were screaming. The gentleman got his wife behind him to protect her. Finally, they were throwing rocks and screaming and yelling, kicking at the bear. The bear was right at their feet. So obviously, this bear meant business. Now, I don't know if he was after them or after their food. I'm not really for sure. I think he was probably looking for something to eat, whatever that might be. To have a bear active in the daytime like that, would not be that normal type of behavior. So anyway, the gentleman kept on fighting the bear, hollering, yelling, screaming, kicking at it, throwing rocks at it too. And he finally got to the point where he says, we need to lay our food down. So he laid his food down, his backpack down, and he and his wife slowly moved up the trail away from the bear while the bear went after their food. And they thought they were in the clear until they heard something behind them, and sure enough, here came the bear back at them again. So the bear showed some interest in their food, but it wasn't enough to where it actually stayed with their food, because he came back after them. So was it predatory behavior? I think probably so. I'm not sure this bear had killed people before, because obviously whenever they go after people and they know how to do it, typically they may swat a person and break their neck. That happened up in Algonquin Park with a situation with a couple up there on an island too. So anyway, the couple was able to keep on fighting. They just were very persistent. They actually were very bold, very aggressive towards the bear, and they were able to move the bear away from them where they could move on up the trail to safety. We went in the next day, went in actually about the same time of day, and we started frying bacon. Typically, that's what we do. If we want to pull a bear in, then smell of bacon will definitely do that. And sure enough, not long after we started frying bacon, we had a bear show up in the daytime. And it made a circle around us there the whole time. It just kept on making a circle watching us the whole time. So anyway, we did end up capturing that bear and holding that bear for a period of time until we monitored the area. No other bears actually showed up during the daytime, so we felt like we had the right bear, and we had to unfortunately put that bear down. Two things I want to mention to you that's important to me, and that should be important, I think, to everybody. A couple concerns I think that people need to know when you're camping or hiking in bear habitat. Now, this is from my experiences in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We had one case where in the middle of the day, we had a jogger that was jogging on a gravel road in Tremont, which is on the Tennessee side of the park too. And a bear came out of the woods behind him and went after the guy. And so the guy would stop, yell, scream, kick at it, throw rocks at it too, and he would kind of back off. He would turn and start running again. The bear would take off after him again. So that continued on and on to where the jogger was just about to wear down. He was just about to the point where he said, I just didn't know if I was going to be able to continue this at all. And about that time when he thought it was just about out of energy, a car pulled around the corner, and this bear was still after him, and he actually jumped on the hood of the vehicle, and as the gentleman drove down with this jogger on his hood of his vehicle, the bear chased him down the road. So anyway, that's another case too where I felt like someone jogging may have prompted a chase response. It's the same thing with some dogs. If you stand up to them, they may bark at you, they may confront you too. But if you turn and run, then it's going to prompt that chase response in some situations with dogs. And I think the same thing happens with bears. So that's another to be concerned about. But one I really want to talk about here, probably more than that, is sleeping at nighttime. We've had several cases where people slept under the stars in hammocks. And I might warn you, at least in the case of the Smokies, to be very, very careful about sleeping in a hammock. We've had a lady bit in Bone Valley campsite in North Carolina on Hazel Creek. Went by and just bit her. I don't necessarily think the bear was trying to kill her for food. I think she had her blue jeans still on in the hammock, and I think she had rubbed her blue jeans probably with after she had cooked and got the smell of whatever her food was on her pants. The bear come by, just bit her leg, bit her thigh, and walked on. We had another case in Elkmont Campground where a bear came in and grabbed a guy and pulled a guy out of a hammock. Now, my feel is that probably the bear was after human food, and he may have had the smell of food on him. I'm not really for sure. But in that case, too, they were able to run the bear away, and we went over and trapped the bear and dealt with that bear, too. I might tell you one situation, too, where it's sometimes bear managers really have a pretty tough decision to make, too. We caught a bear in that campsite. We had no other bear activity prior to this, so we caught this bear, thought for sure we had the right bear. But most people are going to say, well, how do you know you have the right bear? Well, we think we have the right bear, but we really can't say 100% sure we do. So we trap in that same area again for a couple, 3 more nights. If we don't catch anything, then we'll go ahead and euthanize the first bear. So we caught the first bear the first night. The next night we set another trap, same area, with no bear activity in this campsite prior to that. Guess what happened the second night? We caught another bear. And it just so happens both of them were the same sex. They were the same size. We actually had measured the distance between the canines on the gentleman's puncture wounds on his leg, and also the width between the canines on the bear, and they were both identical. This is before DNA was available to us to be able to positively identify that animal too. So in that case, unfortunately, we were kind of a dilemma. One of them was guilty, one of them was not. So unfortunately, we had to put both animals down just because there's not a place we can put a bear, and neither would a state allow us to put a bear on their property if it's one that possibly has injured someone and drugged someone out of a hammock at all. So that was kind of a tough situation to deal with. Let's talk about the Tremont. I've got one here too that happened just about 3 years ago. It's the Alexander case, and you may have heard about it on TV. I'm not sure, but it was let me pull this up right here. He was it happened on June 6, 2015 on Hazel Creek Trail, campsite 24. He was a male, 16 years old, about 145 pounds. He was backpacking with his father, who they were from Ohio, and both of them were sleeping in hammocks. And sometime, I think it was just before midnight, a bear came in, and it just so happened, I talked to the bear manager in the park today. I said, did you guys have any reports of bear activity at that site or nearby sites before that? And he said, absolutely not. We did the year prior, but not that particular year. And so this bear grabbed this Alexander boy and dragged him out of the hammock and was dragging him off in the woods. He started yelling and screaming, and his dad came to his defense, and actually a huge battle between the dad and the bear. But he was able to actually fight the bear off and get his son and actually walk out and get medical help. And that was a case where we're extremely fortunate that young boy is alive today, because the bear went after his head, had lacerations on the back of his head, on his neck area too. So it's very, very fortunate that he's alive today, because it could have killed him pretty easily too. And like I say, what if he was by himself? Would he be alive today? My guess is he probably would not. So that's another case too, where sleeping in hammocks is probably not something that you want to think about doing, at least in an area where you have pretty high
Hey, Kim,
bear density.
if you don't mind,
Uh,
we've had some
you
questions
know what?
pop
If you,
up, which I think are
yeah,
really good, and I'll read them to you if you want to take on answering them. But Carrie started us off, and she asked, "Are most bear attacks fatal,
sure.
or are there many attacks that are not?" And I think you could answer that quite easily. So,
Yeah, yeah. Most of them are not. It's very, very rare that you have a fatality associated with that. Like I tell people, there's a better chance of you being injured or killed driving your vehicle to the trailhead than there would be than you being injured or killed by a bear. Now, if you look at the Smokies over time, the number of visitations have gone up. The number of amount of garbage, the tons of garbage, which is phenomenal, has gone up over time as well. The number of incidents has gone up, but the number of injuries has gone down. Probably back in the 60s and 70s, you had more injuries, but they were small bites on the hand, grabbing by the arm, things like that, where someone is feeding a bear and they get a minor injury associated with that. So the bear is just trying to get food from people. And back at that time, I remember one study where this one lady was recorded. She was trying to set her young daughter on a bear's back at an overlook to get their picture made with the bear. So obviously, a lot of people are very naive about biology. They're very naive about black bears, and so it's just unfortunate that we have those things going on too. So no, most of them are not fatal at all. Most of them, if there's injuries, if the person is bold enough and aggressive enough to, they can fight that animal off. So typically, the bigger the people, the less likely the bear's going to try to take them, just because
Kim,
they just don't feel like they
well,
can
I'll
be
give you a
successful.
second to catch your breath because I could
Okay,
address
what's
this
the next
next
one,
one.
Daryl?
But Beth H wrote that she saw a video posted where there was a car that had been ripped to shreds because the bear got inside the car, likely looking for food. And I will tell you, absolutely, that is something that happens all too often, unfortunately. Beth, by all means, I teach a couple of different bear classes, and I actually have videos, or not videos, but pictures of some of the damage bears cause when they get inside. Not just the vehicle, we have pictures from where they got inside someone's house, and they'll tear it apart. And you hit the nail on the head when you said it's a good reminder of how sensitive a bear's senses are, especially their sense of smell. If you look at bears in the mammal world, they have the strongest sense of smell above all animals or above all mammals. And so I actually talk about that in that other webinar we do, and it's so gosh darn impressive to see literally how that nose drives what a bear does. Their incredibly strong sense of smell. Unfortunately, it gets them into trouble sometimes because they are attracted to things they shouldn't be attracted to. And so I know Yosemite had tremendous um, issues with bears getting into vehicles in one of their more popular picnic areas and campgrounds. And it got so bad that bears would learn to identify certain makes of vehicles that were easier to break into than others. And in fact, I've heard stories from some of the rangers that have worked there. Some of the bears became so adept at it. Unfortunately, a lot of those bears end up having to be removed. But some of the bears would sometimes crawl up onto the top of the car, literally on the roof of the car, and just bounce. And that pressure from bouncing on top of the top popped the doors open. And so they're incredibly intelligent, incredibly smart, and they can do a lot of damage if they get in there. And so, yes, you're absolutely true about their sense of smell. Okay.
Yeah, I saw a couple questions. I can't say who actually posed the question, but it was one about the someone read one of the stories in Bear in the Back Seat book, and it was about meningitis. And that is true. We typically, I'm not sure all states do that, but most states probably, if there's an attack, they probably, well, if they don't, they should have a necropsy performed too to try to figure it out. And we always do a rabies test, but of course we've never had, bears can get rabies. Any warm-blooded mammal can get rabies, but typically it's not a big issue at all with wild black bears. So rabies is a possibility, but not a very high possibility. But meningitis, the case that I just talked about, Evan Paula in 2008, the only abnormalities they knew from that bear was the bear did have meningitis. So Whether that was related to the attack with Evan, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we'll ever know.
Hey,
But
Kim, if you
we
don't
did
mind, I'm
turn
going
up
to ask that we
meningitis in that
kind of
one particular
share
bear.
the response to this because Amira Rita has posed this question before and she's really looking for answers. And I hope we're able to provide as best answer as we can. So hopefully we can piggyback this. But she says her boyfriend lives in Boulder at the bottom of the Rocky Mountains. And last summer, some bears came to the trash cans in the alley. I want to encourage the bears to return to the mountains away from town. I cannot call Colorado Parks and Wildlife because they killed a sleeping bear last year and mama and two cubs the year before. How can I help the bears and be safe too, please? The first thing I want to address, and I talk about this in many of my other webinars, is I'm a wildlife biologist. Kim is a wildlife biologist. We have worked for government agencies where we are the responsible official when it comes to dealing with bears. And I will tell you, in most every situation, the last thing that we want to do, the last thing that most folks want to do is have to put a bear down. We're passionate about these animals. We dedicated our lives to protecting these animals and doing whatever we could to help them. And so making the determination to put an animal down is never easy. It's never something we want to do. And so we give the bears the benefit of the doubt whenever we can. Sometimes, though, we cannot do that. If we work for a government agency, we cannot put human health at risk or human lives at risk. And so if there's an animal that has crossed a line where they become a danger to the public, most government agencies, they won't mess around. They'll have to put that animal down because you simply don't want to make the wrong decision and have that bear hurt somebody or, in the worst case scenario, kill somebody. So it's never an easy situation whenever we're dealing with that. But as far as what, well, Kim, do you want to add to anything to that?
No, not necessarily. Let me look right here on the question. What do you do? See, I think in the urban areas too, where these bears are food conditioned to people, that's why they're there, is to get human food. And yeah, they're probably not going to respond. Most of them are not going to respond. If they've been there for a while, they're very conditioned, lights, yelling, screaming. They're probably not going to do that. What can you do? Well, the best thing to do is try to sanitize your neighborhood as best as possible. Even though maybe you do the right things, but someone down the street may not be doing the right thing. So this bear is going to be traveling. There was a researcher in Pennsylvania. He had a mother bear radio collared, and at dark she put her, I think, 2 or 3 cubs up a tree, and she went on the hunt for garbage. She visited over 100 residents that night looking for garbage before she went back before daylight. Got her cubs and went back up in the woods, for the daytime too. And so that tells me that they go visit a lot of houses or residents, when they go into urban areas too. And I'm sure they're going to go through a lot of people's yards and driveways that have no food available. What I tell people, you can't. You can't put your garbage out. You can't throw food out. You can't have your barbecue grill out and have the smell of that as well. You can't throw your scraps out. You can't have dog food, pet food throughout the summer. You can't really have bird feeders up as well too. But all those things are going to be attractants, and once they get a food reward from you, you're going to have a friend, for a long time. And so just all you can do really is just to make sure that you keep all your food that you could possibly keep in any container, some way or some form, to where.
Okay, we're going to try to answer some of these questions.
That's about really all you can
quick. Kim, I'll read it to you. Gene or Jeannie said, "How many people have been killed in the Smokies?"
Okay, well, good. That kind of brings up well, you know what? We only know of one, Glenda Bradley. Glenda was killed May 21st of 2000. Matter of fact, I think I've got it right here. Yep, I do. I can show you this right here. This right here was from Glenda's funeral announcement too. So you better believe this was near and dear to my heart. It was probably the toughest day of my career in the Smokies. I felt responsible for all bears and what all bears did, even though I couldn't do anything about it. Glenda was a local school teacher. She apparently, I didn't know her. I have a friend that knew her very well that taught with her, said she was a great person. Typically, Glenda and her husband, at this time her ex-husband, on Sunday afternoon, she would walk up the back country about, I don't know, 2.5 miles, and she would walk up to this one big tree stump. She called it the octopus, and it was a place where the trail crew had cut the tree off, and all the roots going every direction to it, it kind of resembled an octopus. So she went up there and she would read a book until her husband or former husband would fish for trout all the way up to her. They would meet and then they would walk back out. Well, her ex-husband, former husband, fished up to the area where she normally was besetting, and Glenda was not there. And so he went up the trail. He was yelling for her, and no sign of Glenda. There was one couple came down, and he asked them if they'd seen her, and they had not. They hiked back down to a trail junction. Then they noticed a bear over there. They noticed Glenda's body lying over in that area, and this bear was very, very protectant of her body. And so they did all they could in their power to yell, scream, run, and they would run to the bear, try to get the bear off of her, and it would just turn around and run back to them and be very, very protected. It was a mother bear with a yearling, so we had never had ever let me find this here just for a second. We'd never had any issues with the bear as far as a nuisance activity is concerned. It had been caught before in as a research bear in the backcountry, so it basically had ear tags in there. So we did have some history on that animal, but nothing related to nuisance behavior at all in the front country or in the back country at all. So anyway, they yelled and screamed. It took a while for some rangers to get up there, obviously, to that distance. I was actually in park headquarters that afternoon. I'll never forget the radio traffic too. I was sitting there. I was working on the elk environmental assessment, and there was one other guy there in the building. It was Bert Bradley, who was actually Glenda's cousin. I was sitting there and I heard the radio traffic, and they said, "There's someone lost here in Elkmont. Could you send a ranger here?" And so the communication said, copy, we'll send someone up. Then they called back and said, no, there's someone injured and the bears are still in the area. And I paused and I looked up at the radio. So I called Bert and I said, Bert, could you play that back for me? So he played the recording back and I heard it and I said, that's what I thought it said. So I had a really funny feeling in my stomach that something really had gone bad wrong. So I called a guy that worked for me and I said, hey, can you come up here? I'm not sure what I've got going on here, but it doesn't sound good. So make a long story short, the Rangers showed up there too. They actually shot and killed both bears. The yearling, about a 40 pound yearling, and the mother, the female bear was 111 pounds, and she was about 5 years old. So you think, well, a 111-pound bear, that's not a very big bear, but actually that's about the average size bear for a mature female in the Smokies. So anywhere between 100, 125 pounds is about the average size. She obviously was not in very good condition. She was very, very hungry. And when Glenda encountered her, she actually took a couple of photographs of this bear before the attack. So anyway, Glenda actually was a little bit larger than weighed actually a little bit more than what the bear did, and we don't know what happened. Of course, no one was there too, but you could see tracks in the grass for the bear and where Glenda was too when they finally met too. But one thing they found out where the bear had apparently went by her food sack or her backpack, and it had I think it had a candy wrapper in it. And it had, I think, another candy bar that was not eaten. So she had food in her backpack or day pack, and the bear apparently went and checked that out and did not eat that. It went after her too. So another case to where it really was no human food involved. And so that was the first and only human fatality that we're aware of. There was a case back in 1969, Dennis Martin, who was a young boy that became lost, and they never turned up anything. So that's a possibility. You know, a bear could have killed him, or maybe could have consumed his body after he died from whatever. Too, we're not really for sure. So, Glenda Bradley is the only case that we are aware of in the Smokies. It turned out to be the first human fatality caused by a bear in a national park, and the first one in the eastern U.S. Of course, Canada had some. Obviously, the farther north you go, the higher likelihood that you're going to have more predaceous bears or bears with more predatory behavior too. There was another case, and Daryl, I might tell you this one more story since we're talking about fatalities now. It was the family Petruseks from Ohio, and these stories, just whenever I talk about these stories, it just brings it all back to life for me again too. It's really hard for me to talk about them, but anyway, I got a call and said, "Hey, there's been a young girl killed in the Cherokee National Forest down near Chattanooga." It was around the time of Easter, and there was a mother, Elora, who was, I think Elora was 7 years old.
She was
I think
six
she
years
was
old.
7 years old. Yeah. What was that? 6 years. Okay. 6 years old, and then her young brother too. So they had hiked about a mile into this waterfalls, and there was another couple there, and the couple had told them that we saw a bear, you know, when we come in here. So they felt uncomfortable. So this mother and Elora and their young brother decided to walk back to the car. Well, on the way back to the car, they were walking back on a very narrow trail, on a steep section of the trail where it had I think it had like a handrail on the left hand side and a very steep bank on the right hand side. So it got to the point to where they got there and they encountered this bear. So apparently the bear went after the young boy first, grabbed him. The mother immediately went on the attack and was trying to fight the bear. During this whole encounter, the witness family came up behind them. And of course, they were in shock when they saw what was going on, and they yelled, and the mother yelled, said, "You know, here, take my son." She was able to get her young son away from the mother bear and give it to this witness couple. And they said, "Look, take him and leave." Well, we're not really for sure where Elora was at that time. She was probably up in the woods. But anyway, she was there, and this couple left with a young boy who was injured, and left this mother fighting this aggressive bear. And I talked with a paramedic, the first person that made it back to the scene, and he said that when he got to the mother, she lived through this. She actually was injured, but she went up to her and she said, "Well," she whispered something. He said, "I got close to her," and he said, "Hey, I heard my little girl behind me," and not being a mother, but knowing how mothers are, I think I have an idea what happened to him. My guess is, this is just speculation. My guess is Elora probably saw her mother fighting this bear and probably started, you know, making noise, yelling or screaming for her mom. And I'm sure the bear probably heard Elora's cry for help and for her mom. And then the bear went after her. And of course, the mother heard that, whatever happened after that too, because the mother couldn't talk about the incident for a couple of years after that too. She was really in shock too. So I just can imagine too. They end up basically, you know, trapping a couple bears. They put down, and actually DNA it indicated that they had really captured the right bear too. So that was a tough one for me. I went down and talked to them about bear behavior, about this whole instance. So you better believe if you're a bear manager and you have to deal with human fatality too, it's very very tough sometimes too, and your jobs are very tough too. But it's something that we have to deal with because bears and people they're gonna mix. They're gonna be, you know, in the same area forever too. So we have to know how we should react
That particular
to it. So
case, Kim,
that's kind of the two
I was
cases I
just
was involved with.
appointed the the big game coordinator. So I was over the black bear program for Tennessee for just a matter of 2 weeks when I was called about that particular situation. And pretty much my job, since I was further away in Nashville, my job was to direct all the questions through one particular source. And I will tell you, I know a couple of the folks that were there firsthand, and they have a hard time talking about it. And so I could only imagine how impactful that has to be. And so again, we're not trying to scare people, but we want people to understand that this is a really serious and it can be a life changing event if you have one of these serious bear encounters. And so we're just trying to provide people with information on how to react in case that situation comes up. So let's see if we get a couple more questions. We're almost pushing 2 hours here. So um,
There, I'll say one thing. If you have any interest in that Elora Petrosek, you can look. I think there's a website. If you Google Elora's Light, Elora's Light, Light, it will kind of show them pictures of her too, and just being a little girl and stuff too. And it just some conversations happened between her and her mother a week before that about dying and stuff as well. And it's just, I mean, it just breaks your heart. And it wants to, it always wanted me to make sure that we made the right decisions to make sure we
all right,
protected bears, but
I'm
we,
looking at
we
some
also
more comments
protected our
here, and there's a
people.
couple of really, really good ones. Jan wrote, "Sure seems that the bears withstand a deadly toll simply because humans are unable to be in their environment. Just wondering why there isn't required education regarding how to behave safely when camping in a bear's territory. Many parks require registration for campers. Seems like a perfect time to learn." Um, who knows where it will go? And I will tell you, in some national parks, you go to, I can't remember the name of it, but um, up in Alaska, there's a couple of places that they have really strict guidelines on what you can and can't do amongst some of those areas where the grizzlies are feeding in those salmon runs. And so, depending on the density of bears and the likelihood of you encountering bears, they do ramp up some of the education, especially in the national parks. And so, I can only imagine that bear education will be ramped up more and more. Look what we're doing here. We're trying to get a lot of this started here, and so hopefully it snowballs and it just grows from here. But you bring up a great point. Education is the key to living with these bears and knowing what to do and how to behave when you're in their territory. Um,
Well, I might say one thing about that. You know, we just recently had the human bear conflicts workshop too, and one of the gentlemen there gave an interesting presentation. He basically said just what we've always kind of been led not to believe is he said education don't work, and uh, and he said, and I'm not sure why he said that because he said typically people are educated, they know what they should do, but in my experience, a lot of people don't know. Just because they're educated, there has to be a willful purpose and a willful action to be able to use that education on your, to be able to protect yourself or protect bears too. I've had people before that know they can get a ticket by feeding a bear, but they really don't care. They're willing to get a fine if they have the opportunity to feed a bear. So it's unfortunate too that people do that. But many people do have education. They know, there's education everywhere about what you should or shouldn't do with a bear. Some of them
that's a good
choose
point.
to use
Teresa
that
asked a
education.
question
Some
of
of
you,
them choose
Kim,
not to.
and maybe you can answer this really quickly. We already touched on some of it. While in the Smokies, do you recommend bear spray, and does the spray hurt the bears?
Well, you know what? It's obviously there's some discomfort. I'm not sure I can say whether it's painful or not. Obviously, it's very there's some discomfort with burning. Obviously, that capsaicin in the eyes as well too. And there has to be some discomfort as well for these bears to be able to run away, and we want them to run away too. So there has to be enough discomfort or pain, whichever word you want to use, for these animals to be able to know that's a negative experience for it, and it wants to move away. The Smokies now are using another tool. They're using tasers, same tasers they use on people. They're using those on kind of a last resort on bears that may be candidates for euthanasia, either of torn into 10 or whatever. But they're trying tasers on these bears. Like many other animals, hate electricity, and tasers are having some positive. They're getting some positive results
I
from
will
that.
add, and
It
this
works
is
on some
actually
bears, some bears it doesn't. Okay.
it was
What was
whether or
the other
not the
part?
spray hurt the bears. And so, but Kim, if you don't mind me responding to your regarding the
Yeah.
electricity, back when I was working at the Bear Center, we
Say
did
it's very,
aversive
very
conditioning on those cubs,
sure.
trying to get them more afraid of people. And Without a doubt, when a bear gets sprayed, when a bear gets zapped with a cattle prod or a taser, um, any type of aversive conditioning you apply, without a doubt, the bear reacts. And so I don't doubt that those tasers are very effective. The one thing that I do question, though, is my experiences when I was at the Bear Center was if the bear is so smart that it learns to identify the things that cause pain. And so if I was anywhere near the bears and I had the the cattle prod or pepper spray in my hand, the bears wouldn't come near me. But as soon as those items, they can recognize those sources of pain. I'm hoping that is not the case with the tasers over time, but that's something to be mindful of. They know what to avoid, what not to avoid, and so it'll be interesting what comes of that. Beth commented a couple of times about the education really ramping up, and it's great that you go to visit some of these places and you see more and more people talking about it.
Okay.
Um, oh, I don't see any more. There's I don't want to say I wish you wouldn't thank us. I can't tell you enough, and I believe I'm speaking for Kim. We enjoy this as much as you do. Talking about wildlife is our passion, especially about bears, and we enjoy doing this. And so I appreciate that you guys are here to listen to us. So it should be us thanking you for joining in.
Yeah, you know what I see, Jeannie and Beth's comment there too. You know, it's. I think Beth said it's surprising there's not more people that are attacked by bears with, you know, with the so many crazy people out there. I mean, I think there's people that are very, very intelligent people, but for some reason when they go in Great Smoky Mountains National Park or any other park or where bears are or wildlife, a lot of them just go brain dead. I have no idea why. There's just a yearning to try to get as close to animals as you possibly can. And so I think a lot of people just live for the moment. I don't think they really care about that particular bear, what's going to happen to it. I think they want to get a picture of it. They want to get as close as they can to, and obviously it's a dangerous situation for them and dangerous situation for the animal as well too. I can tell you one quick story. It's kind of the bears kind of won this one. We had a mother with a couple three cubs on one area of Cades Cove Loop. Of course, a group of people were there watching these bears, and this one guy from Alabama, uh, he actually did a kind of an end around. He came up behind the bears, wanted to get a very very close look. So he came up and he crawled up over top of this log, and he was looking right down on these cubs. Well, they cubs just freaked out, and they were going every direction. Well, the mother saw him, so he definitely surprised everything. And this mother apparently was a very experienced, mature mother, and she went on the attack. So the gentleman said that he saw her coming after him, so he turned and started running as hard as he could. And he actually felt something hit him in the back. So this bear apparently lunged, hit him in the back, and knocked him into a tree that was down, had protruding limbs, sharp limbs, and one of the limbs hit a home run and went into part of his private parts and did some very, very serious damage too. So he had to go to the hospital and get numerous stitches in a sensitive area of his body too. And he went back to his hometown. I think the park had released his name to the local newspaper down there, and they kind of made him out to being kind of not the smartest person on the face of the earth. And he got very upset with us and was going to file suit against us because we released his name. But in that case too, most people, that bear had injured him too. It actually hit him too, and so that was a provoked attack. He was provoked at that time. And so I was asked the next day, are you going to kill that bear? And I said, no, we're not going to kill her, but we are going to catch her and we're going to put her in captivity and we're going to breed more bears just like her and release them all over the park, because there could not be a better mother than that mother, what she did. That she hit that guy, knocked him out of the way where she could protect her cubs. So I thought
you wonder
the
why
Bears
wanted to,
definitely
that guy was
won
coming
that one.
after you. That's a hilarious story. I actually remember Bill Stiver, who was another biologist in the park. He called me up when that event occurred because I was working at the Bear Center, and when the information finally came out that the injury was not because the bear had attacked him, but but he more or less ran and was pushed into the tree. I remember Bill says, "No, we're pulling, we're not putting that bear down," and I thought that was a fantastic response from you guys. One of the things I'm going to do, and you all, if you have any other questions, you could keep typing. I'm going to end this slideshow because we have gone 2 hours, and it is amazing how quickly time flies when we do these things. I can't believe how fast the time goes by. But I do want to wrap this up because the one thing I've got to do, got to summarize this. The main thing here that I want everyone to understand: bears are beautiful. They're extremely intelligent. They're absolutely wonderful animals. I truly love them. However, they're also extremely powerful and they're unpredictable at times. And so the thing that I want everyone to understand is they deserve your respect. You can never fool around with a bear because they can, as you've heard from some of Kim's stories, they can do damage. And so they deserve your respect, and it's our obligation to give it to them. And so obviously we thank you all for joining us on this presentation. It's wonderful to give you this information, and we'll stick around a little bit longer. If Kim wants to go to bed, I still got a couple hours before I go to bed. But I do have to give photo credits because our presentations are nothing without some amazing photographs. Bob Howdeshell supplied most of the photographs in this presentation, and a lot of those folks have given a picture here or two. Some may not even be featured in this particular presentation, but I have a wonderful slew of wildlife photographers that they make these Wildlife for You presentations what they truly are. So I want to give props where they're deserved. Also want to let everyone know, many of you already know this, but the Wildlife for You website is up and running. It's been up and running for a couple of weeks. We're still working out the last couple of snags, but we haven't found many. And so any class that you want to sign up for, you go to www.wildlifeforyou.com and you can see all the classes we offer. There's a calendar at the bottom that has the classes schedule. You click on that calendar and then you could literally register right online through PayPal. It's super easy, quick, and simple, and it relieves all that back and forth email that we have to do. I also want to tell you we are on Facebook. You just look up Wildlife for You. Follow us there because that's where I'm always giving updates about new classes that are scheduled. It's also a great place for you to provide comments. Let us know if you've attended a webinar, what you thought of it. And we're not looking only for positive comments. If obviously we like those the best, but if there's ways for us to improve, let us know. We're always looking to provide the best learning opportunity that we can possibly give you. And I mentioned it before, we do have a webinar coming up next week. It's next Thursday. Stephanie Dennis will be joining us. She's going to assist with this presentation called Trophic Cascades, Nature's Delicate Balance. We're going to be talking about some of the impacts from the wolf release in the greater Yellowstone area. So join us next Thursday. If you haven't registered, you could either go to the website or send me the email like you've always done, but that'll be a fantastic webinar next Thursday. And last but not least, I got to plug Kim again because he's got 2 incredible books out there, Bear in the Backseat 1 and 2, Adventures of a Wildlife Ranger. And I will tell you, in case you don't know, I forget which site rated the top 10 most influential books written about wildlife conservation, and it included some of those huge heavy hitters like David Thoreau. But Kim made the top 10 list for the Bear in the Backseat, Adventures of a Wildlife Ranger. And what it's based on is books that really impact the general public and get them thinking about and appreciating wildlife in the outdoors more so. So if you've never read those books, look them up on Amazon. You can find them there, and they're absolutely fantastic short stories about all the adventures Kim had when he was working at Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So I will go back. I don't know, Kim, if you saw any other questions come up, but yes. Thank you again for joining us. I'll stick around as long as you need to answer questions.
Kelly, I see your comment there too about the books. We've got actually 3 more books that's going to come out if I can ever have time to work on them. So hopefully we'll get one of them out this year. It's we're going to have Bear in the Backseat 3, or we may call it a different title, but we'll have a couple of the books as well too. One about rangers and poachers in the park, another one about the wild man of Cataloochee. We'll do that as well too. So anyway, thank you all very much. I appreciate that, and appreciate all you do and your love of bears and conservation too. Because if we don't care,
Hey,
there's
Beth,
probably no one else
Beth
out there
H,
that
I
will.
just
So
saw
thank
that
you all very, very
the
much.
thank you for crediting the photographers. I make sure I do it because they're the ones that truly make these presentations the best. And so it sounds to me like you're a photographer. So if you have anything that you're willing to let us use in some of our slideshows for these educational webinars that we put on, we're always looking for great pictures because they're truly what makes these presentations so impactful. And a couple people said this is the best one yet. I'm getting to the point where I'm not believing you because every time we give a new webinar, it's always the best one yet. But thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Okay. All right, Daryl, I'm gonna have to jump off here. So I
I'm going to shut off
appreciate
the
everybody's
recording.
time
And
and
again,
look
Kim and I
forward to the
thank
next.
everyone for joining us, and I appreciate everyone that has hopped on. I will stick around even though Kim has to go. I'm 2 hours behind him, so I appreciate you joining us, Kim, and we'll hopefully see you next time.
Simple. Thanks.